Okay, let's get started there, folks. Welcome back to another 2 p.m. PST Twitch stream. I'm your host, Stranger Jim, and even though we are not seeing it right at this moment in time, we are going to be working on some Pega Academy. Once it shows up, there we go. All right. We're going to be working on creating a data relationship today. Specifically, the data objects topic here. I can see here that each one of these is 10 minutes long, and we got a pretty long module quiz as well. So we'll see if we can get through. How long it's going to take us. They estimate 30 minutes. I don't go off their recommendations on time because it often feels that I take a long time going through these. Those of you that are watching on YouTube, if you're going through my playlist, you already know this information, but for anybody that is currently watching me right now on Twitch, please know that, I am not a Pega trainer. I'm not endorsed by Pega at all. I am personally trying to get to the point where I can take the system architect certification to get it. So I have that available. I may even try going for the business architect certification as well, seeing that there really isn't that much of a difference between the two. Um, well, I mean, there's a lot more in terms of the system architect when it comes to the Dev Studio side of things. So we're going to be covering a lot of that information. But um, good majority of the system architect um, studying is also covered in the business architect. So, um, so yeah. Um, so yeah. Just to reiterate, I'm not an instructor. This is not meant to take the place of instructor-led training. If you're thinking that it will be, well, sorry, I won't have all the answers. Um, so, um, you know, uh, normally I would recommend the instructor-led training. Um, the instructor-led training that I had from work wasn't great, but I can't say that that's going to be something that is um, specific to um, to you know to overall instructor-led training. Okay, I had a crappy time with it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that others will have the same exact experience. So um, certifications aren't that expensive. Um, each voucher is approximately about 200 bucks or so. Um, and hey, you could take that and eventually get a pretty decent paying job out of it. So, um, check, consider looking into that. Um, or follow along with me. I know that I'm taking a long time to go through this process, but I mean, it's meant, I want to make sure that I'm getting like all of it like locked in my brain, for when I do take the test, in the future. So, um, or at least I'm trying to. Doesn't always lock in my brain, so repetition is helpful. So, so yeah. All right, let's go ahead and get into data objects here and let us proceed. Okay, so to process cases, Pega platform applications use data objects to collect related case data. A data object is a template for describe an entity, such as a person or an item, by grouping a set of related fields. For example, an application might contain an account data object that you can use two data types. One that allows the customer to transfer funds between bank accounts and one that allows the customer to change the address that is associated with their account. The account data object includes fields that describe an account, such as account number, account balance, and next statement date. Referencing the account data object avoids the need to define account-related fields for each case type. So, so if you have a case type for transfer funds and a case type for changing the address, they're both referencing your account, which has, the values of account number, current balance, next statement date, and address. So, you know, this will allow for you to change address. And, your current balance has, it could, definitely be referenced by transfer funds. So, although transfer funds would require like multiple accounts, but I mean, all you need is two separate account numbers to do the transfer, right? So you can use the data object as many times as you need in your application. In the preceding example, the transfer funds case type can use the account data object to model both the source and target accounts for the transfer. You know, the two account numbers and then the two balances, and then you just need to get an amount from to be withdrawn from one account. So you'll reduce the current balance by that amount, and then you have the transfer to account, which will have an increase in your current balance. Um, yeah. The collection of case types and data objects in your application holistically defines the data model for your application. When designing a data model, use data objects to organize business data needed to process the case. When did it start talking about data models again? It hasn't. Okay. This is just apparently a tip that they brought up data model again. Okay. As a best practice, the case type should only include case metadata, fields that describe the case and case operations, such as creation date and the person or persons assigned to into any open tasks. Most case metadata is collected automatically by a Pega platform using system properties inherited by the case type. You can define additional metadata fields as needed. Hmm. As a best practice, the case type should only include case metadata, fields that describe the case, and case operations, such as creation date and the person or persons assigned to any open tasks. Most case metadata is collected automatically by Pega platform using system properties inherited by the case type. You can define additional metadata fields as needed. I'm not sure what's really being said here. Um, it's giving me the sense that, hey, your case type isn't going to be using any kind of data objects whatsoever in it to to help the case type along. But that's like the initial impression that I'm getting from that particular tip, but I mean that doesn't necessarily make any sense either. So, um, So I'm not sure about that tip. I'm not quite sure what they're trying to go for on that one. Um, if you're watching right now on Twitch or you're watching this on YouTube, you know, maybe re-explain this tip a little bit because um, you know, it's sounding like they're saying, hey, in best practices, case types shouldn't use data objects at all. Should only use case metadata. And it's like, wait, um, am I reading that correctly? I mean, is data objects included within the case metadata? Because it doesn't look like it based off of what they're saying here. So it's a little suspect. But okay, moving on. Within each data object, the data type represents the technical implementation for the data object, such as the names and types of fields used to capture and present information about the entity. Collectively, the different fields represent a single type of object and define the structure of the data object. When you create a data object, Pega Platform automatically creates the corresponding data type. In DevStudio, developers work directly with the underlying data type, not with the data object. As a result, you may find terms data object and data type used interchangeably on projects and documentation. Hmm. But they're different. They can't be used interchangeably. What the hell is this note all about? It states right here, within each data object, a data type represents the technical implementation for the data object, such as names and types of fields used to capture and present information about the entity. Okay. The data object is the entity itself. The data type is talking about names and fields used within it. So you can't interchangeably talk about data object and data type. That doesn't make any sense because data type is only a portion of the entire data object. You can't interchange them. What the hell? Uh, alright, we move on. So, for example, an HR application includes a case type to manage job requisitions and process applicants for open positions. To process a new candidate, HR must gather basic information about the candidate. To collect information about a candidate from an open job requisition, a developer could create a candidate data object with corresponding data type that includes fields such as first name, last name, email, and phone. These, these are not the same. Data type and data object are not the same. You know, in addition to grouping data elements, data objects can group views and other rules related to the data object. For example, the candidate data object can include a calculation to combine a given name and surname into a full name for the candidate, such as John Smith. Where did data elements come into play here? I want to make sure that, you know, if you're using keywords here that you know, yeah, they didn't really address that, as a keyword. So I'm gonna assume that they meant um, group and data types, not necessarily data elements. So, okay, because they never specify what data elements actually are. So I'm making the assumption right at this moment in time. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this. Anybody that works for Pega or a Pega trainer, data elements here is another way for them saying data types. So, like I said, correct me if that's incorrect, because um, you know, in a sense, that's what it's doing here. A data object candidate is combining, you know, the data types of first name, last name, email, and phone into it. It's grouping all those together. And then you can group them even more by creating, additional fields such as, a full name. So you can extend the structure of the data object by referencing other data objects. When one data object references a second data object, the fields in the second data type become part of the data type of the referencing data object. Reference data objects can be used either once or multiple times, depending on the need. Okay, this is, once again, they're a little suspect on their wording here, because when one data object references a second data object, the fields of the second data type, shouldn't that be fields of the second data object, become part of the data type of the referencing data object? I don't like how you know, they're saying, hey, this is, they get used interchangeably, and now you're even trying to prove that they get interchanged down here, but in all reality, they should be different. You should not be. Uh, uh, for example, a candidate data object also needs to include fields for information such as mailing address and employment history. The address and employment history can be configured as data objects referenced by the candidate data object. The address data object extends the candidate data object with fields such as street name, city, and postal code, while the employment history data object adds fields such as start date, end date, position, and employer. The address data object is used once to capture a single address, while the employment history data object can be used more than once to create a list of prior employers for the candidate. So, for the candidate, you not only have, you know, the address data object to get their fields of street name, city, and postal code, but they also have the employment history data object um, that has, start date, end date, position, and employer. Now, I have seen, it's not it's not that often, but I have seen some companies asking for, your address history. Okay. Um, so, meaning like, hey, we need, addresses for, your past like five places that you lived at. Obviously, if you've only lived in one particular house your entire life, then obviously that's not a big deal. But if you've been moving around quite a bit, then you might need um, multiple references for address and not just one. So In the following image, click the plus icons to learn more about the relationship between a data object and the corresponding data type. Okay, data usage and the case type. An instance of the data object is referenced in one or more of the steps in the case type. The fields referenced can vary between steps so that users focus on data relevant to each step. For example, the collect candidate information step references the name, email address, phone, and address fields, while the collect employment history step references the fields defined by the employment history data object. Um, I mean, they could have referenced um, the the example up here with the address, you know, in the sense that, not only are you collecting the candidate information such as name, email, and phone number, but you're also getting the address object fields with the address fields, so they could have done something along those lines. The fact that they're like, hey, you have employment history data object. Well, you also have the address data object, but you're not referencing it here. So that's kind of unfortunate that they missed that opportunity. They're doing it here, data relationship address, but they didn't really reference it in this particular window. Oh well. Data object. Data object is identified in the case workflow, allowing the business to determine data needs throughout the life cycle of the case. So, you have the candidate data object up there where it has, the first, last email address and phone number, and then it has the address and the employment history. So, data type. The data type identifies the fields used to describe a candidate. Listed fields may contain text data, email address, and telephone numbers, and establish a relationship of instances of other data objects that describe an address in a previous occupation. Now, here's what I'm kind of wondering that they're doing here. Okay, because um, they put this on, over these fields, right? The data types. But here's the thing. It's covering the entire width here. It's covering all the fields, right? Um, are they saying that this entire thing is a data type? If that's the case, then I can understand them trying to go, hey, a data object of candidate is the exact same as the data type. I mean, if that's the case, then okay, yes, you can interchange data object and data type, you know, with each other because they're essentially the same in that particular case. But I'm hoping that they're not. Okay, I'm hoping that they're referencing like each one of these rows here as like a data type. You know, meaning name, ID, type, and options and application layer is all one data type. That's what I'm thinking. That it that that's what I'm thinking that it is. Now I could be completely wrong on it. I don't know. Okay. Um, they could be going with the first option. I don't know why. It makes no sense if that's the case because you're basically putting up two different words to mean the exact same thing. That causes confusion. Don't do that. Okay. Um, leave data object because um, a Java object is meant to be a container for everything, all the fields and, variables, within it. Okay. Data type to me sounds like it's, you know, all that all that information, you know, the name, ID, you know, the type, the field type, the options, the application layer, all that kind of gets contained within the data type. That would make sense to me. Okay. And you don't have an overlapping of information there. Okay. Because you can have multiple data types, in the example that I'm trying to present here, contained within a data object. Okay. Um, and that's what I'm thinking should be like the best practice here. But again, I don't know. Okay. Um, I wish I had the answer of what they were trying to go for on that, but I'm not 100% sure. So um, so we'll have to kind of move on from that. Okay. Inheritance. You can create, inheritance is, one of the, um, one of the pillars of object-oriented programming. So if, you know, um, for programmers, this should be common knowledge, um, especially if you've taken any object-oriented programming, you know, at all. So for anybody that's in business, then obviously um, this is not as common because, or I should say, for for programmers, it's like beaten down into you, especially if you've done a lot of object-oriented programming. Okay, inheritance. If you're in business, obviously, I wouldn't expect you to have that kind of a background at least. So, um, so if I say inheritance to, someone that just does ads all the time, they might think, oh, okay, inheritance. In other words, you're inheriting the house from your grandparents or something random like that. And it's like, mm, sort of, not quite. Um, all right, but let's move on. You can create data objects to reuse assets from an existing data object through inheritance. For example, person is a generic data object, or a parent data object, while customer and call center representative, CCR, are more specialized data objects. To denote the relationship between parent and child data objects, use the parent-child pattern, for example, person-customer and person-CCR. All three data objects have common fields, including name, telephone, and email. By creating the common fields in the person data object, you can reuse the fields in the customer and call center representatives data objects. The fields tax identification number and membership number apply to customers only, so you define them in the customer data object. Because the field employee ID applies to employees only, you define the field in the call center representative data object. Okay, so just to kind of reiterate, reiterate what they are talking about here. Okay, so you have this person data object, right? You can use this person data object for everybody, right? And you can say, hey, here's their name, here's their telephone number, and here's their email. You can give that to every single person out there, you know. If they don't have a telephone, if they don't have an email, sure, okay. Um, and one would hope that they have a name. um, unless um, unless you did something like Prince did, when he was alive and changed his name into a symbol. Um, so you had, you know, so here's the thing. There might be some special requirements that you might need for, you know, adding additional data to help you out in a certain application, right? So, like you may want to have, like they're mentioning here, well, call center representative or you know, um, call service representative, CSR. That's another one. Um, so, but here's the thing: you wouldn't necessarily need employee ID for the customer, right? So if you were to say, hey, I want the tax identification number, membership number, and employee ID, and put it on the person, it wouldn't necessarily make sense, right? Because, you know, um, some of these values might not necessarily, work well with each other, or, um, they are, um, they're meant for, only those specific, um, you know, those specific employees or those specific customers. Okay, you can't really interchange them very well. Okay, I mean, you can definitely have an employee that is also a customer. That's true. Okay, but you don't necessarily want to. Um, that's not going to be the case for everybody, right? Hopefully you're going to have a lot more customers, for your business than you would for your employees. One would hope, right? So you're going to be needing a lot more space for customers than you would for employees. Okay. Um, um, so, uh, trying to put that all into one object that gets reused over and over and over again, it's going to be basically a waste of space, waste of time, because a lot of that large person data isn't going to be full. It's going to be empty, for good reason because they're not technically an employee, right? So, why take that data around to other portions of your applications if you don't need it, right? So that's why you can create multiple different objects to handle those particular requirements. So, like if you have you have an employee that needs to review records, for example, then you just need them to have that employee ID, and that's it. You don't need their tax identification number. You don't need their membership number because they're not technically customers at that particular moment in time. Um, so yeah, sourcing. You can source data objects locally from a Pega platform system record, or you can source data objects from an external system record, such as an HR or inventory database your company already uses. Um, Alternatively, data objects contain data that you or a case participant enters or changes during application processing that are not associated with any system or record. Okay, I mean, sure, but if you're going to be wanting to save that information, then you probably want to, get, you know, get this data. that you entered or changed into a system record. Unless, of course, it's not really necessary. Um, like, for example, some businesses might not have the security necessary to handle, to keeping a hold of a person's credit card information, for example, right? They don't meet the requirements of passing the rigorous restrictions to holding onto someone's credit card information. So they may say, sorry, you have to re-enter it each and every single time, right? So um, when you determine how to source a data object, consider the questions in the following image. Questions assume that you are new to Pega platform and that you create an application from scratch. Click on the following image, click the plus icons to learn about an example of each data object sourcing option. So, do you need to save the data outside of the case? No, no system record. Yes, does the data you need already exist? If it already exists, then you need an external system record. If it does not already exist, does the outside agency need the data or have the data you need? If it does have the data you need, then you go with the external system record again. Or if the outside agency does not have the data you need, is the data used in non-Pega applications? Um, if yes, you know, if the data is being used in other um, used for other things besides what Pega does, then you want to kind of keep with that external system record. Um, but if the data is like brand new, meaning like it hasn't ever been set up with anything in particular, they're saying, hey, use a Pega system record. So, as a windshield repair case type, customers send a service request that includes the exact location of the customer. The current location is necessary for case processing, but is not useful outside of the case. In this example, you do not save the data. In this example, you do not save the data to any system record. Externally sourced data object, something or other. A company that handles automobile repairs a company that handles automobile repairs has a parts inventory database. The company has a new implementation that they develop in Pega platform. The auto parts data object in the Pega application references the external parts inventory database the company already uses. A case type that handles the hiring of drivers needing applicant driving records from the Registry of Motor Vehicles, Department of Motor Vehicles, which is external to the Pega platform. In this example, you source the driving record data object externally by connecting to the RMV DMV database. In a shopping application, users enter their contact information. Customer contact information is useful across a few different company applications, including a third-party customer service application. In this example, you push the data into an external system record. Locally stored data object. Standard test enrollment application. Different case types handle enrollment in different exams. In each case, applicants specify whether they need special accommodations, including readers, large print exams, special seating, or extended time The list of special accommodations needs to exist outside of the case so that multiple case types can access the information. You do not need to share accommodation information with third-party applications. You can source the data object from a Pega platform system record. All right. With that, we move on. Now, if anybody's like watching this on Twitch right now, or maybe you're watching this on YouTube later and you have any kind of questions, feel free to ask. Now, I might not be able to answer it, but I can always try to see if I can find someone that can. So, I know a couple people that are, um, have a strong background in Pega, so they might be able to answer it. So don't feel like, um, you know, if you have questions, feel free to voice them because um, better to ask questions and have the person respond like I don't know, but I'll find out, than you know trying to not even knowing what the answers are. Okay, so or never knowing what the answer is. So do yourself a favor, ask those questions. And that basically applies to anything, really. If you have a question on any topic, you know, ask it. So, okay, we're getting close to the end here. So, best practices. Whenever possible, use standard, commonly used data objects that Pega platform provides, such as address, postal, and address email. You can also add relevant data objects to your application. If data object only partially meets your needs, you can extend that data object. For example, if you want to create an employee data object, you can extend the existing person data object to create the person employee data object. If a suitable data object does not exist yet, create a new one. For example, if you want to add the airport codes data object, but you cannot use or extend an existing data object, create a new one in Pega Platform. If you add a new data object to the case workflow in App Studio, Pega Platform creates the data object as a draft object. A draft data object does not reference a data type. Draft objects allow the business to identify how and when the data is used in the case lifecycle, which may influence the design of the data type. You can add the data type to a draft data object by using the Data Objects and Integrations page. Alright, check your knowledge with the following interaction. You are building a new customer service application in Pega Platform with a case type that allows customers to submit feedback on orders that they placed with a legacy product application. Customers can specify their preference for the application display, which affects how they enter feedback. The following data objects are necessary: customer, products, feedback, and preference. Customer for customer information and their order history. Products for a list of products that are available for purchase by customers. Feedback for customers to specify the type of feedback that they submit, enhancement, compliment, complaint, and to enter a short description of their feedback. And preference for the user preference for the application display in the browser. How would you source the four data objects? Okay, so you have Pega Platform System Record, you have External System Record, and you have No System Record. So, um, let's see. Um, Okay, so Pega platform with a case type that allows customers to submit feedback on orders that they placed with a legacy product application. Customers can specify their preference for the application display, which affects how they enter feedback. Okay, so here's how I would probably look at this. One, customers and products are most likely something that they had for their legacy product application, which means customer and product are most likely in an external system record, something that they have used in the past and they're using for with other application or websites or whatnot, right? So they're probably using an external system record for both of these. Feedback is probably something that you'd probably want to put in the Pega platform system record. It's new. You're trying to build a new service application that allows customers to submit feedback. So you probably want the Pega platform to do that, to handle that, because they don't have an external system record to handle feedback at this time. So that's probably the Pega platform system record. That's what I'm figuring so far. Preference. Now, if you if you save uh, the preferences of the user, then you might want to put that under customer. Okay, you might want to save that under the customer. Put preference under the customer object, right? Have another object, for preferences contained within, the customer object, so that if they want to save the preferences for that customer whenever they log into the application, they can do so. But based off of their example, you might not necessarily need that. You might not necessarily need a system record for that. So that's what I'm figuring, and it's correct. Okay. So feedback data object values are defined by Pega and therefore sourced by Pega. Product and customer data objects should use the existing external legacy system as a source. Um, Same with this one for products. Preference data object is useful for application display but does not need to be saved outside of the feedback case. I mean, like I said, it all depends. Okay. If you have the application that is something that you want the customer to be using on a regular basis, such as like like Steam, for example, right? You know, um, if I log into Steam, I have my customer and I have my products there, but I also have my preferences there as well, and that gets saved with my particular profile. So you might not need it for your application, but you might also need it too. So if it wasn't in their external system record already, then you could potentially put it in the Pega platform system record. But if it was me, I'd probably create it as a separate object, and I would probably put it in under customer. So that the customer, whenever they log in to the application wherever, then all those preferences go with. So that's what I think is like the best options right at this moment in time. Okay, apparently my phone is slowly but surely dying on me. I need my phone active, so alright. Sorry about that. We are going to go ahead and close on out here. You know, my alarm didn't necessarily go off, so that's why, I was a little, I was kind of wondering about that. We are going to move on to our just chatting from at this point. Um, all these videos are uploaded to my YouTube channel, so feel free to check that out if you're watching on Twitch. For those of you that are watching on YouTube right now, I want to thank you for, you know, sticking through on this particular topic. Feel free to, um, do the regular YouTube, um, you know, helping out the channel, like, subscribe, um, bell notification, all that jazz. That would be greatly appreciated. I also have other playlists. If you have any interest in that, you're welcome to go check those out. Um, you know, Let's Plays um, and other coding projects and stuff like that. So feel free to check that out. Um, but yeah, that's where we're gonna go ahead and end it. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording right now.